Well, first of all, congratulations, Alan. I understand that you have completed your year-long project, which is a novel essentially titled Conversation with a Dictator. And my understanding is which is a fictional dialogue with Myanmar's military chief. So we talked about this book a little bit in our last meeting, but could you tell me now, why do you think you would need to write this book, Alan?
Thank you for the opportunity, Wei, to speak to the BBC and to you, to the people of the world, to the people of your country. This book, Conversation with a Dictator, a challenge to the authoritarian assault, which is the subtitle. And then it's a fictional dialogue with Senior General / Dictator Min Aung Hlaing in Myanmar. And the reason for it, Wei, was a couple of years back with my colleague Fergus Harlow and I, we conceived a book called The Voice of Hope, Aung San Suu Kyi from Prison. And in that, the title was A Letter to a Dictator, which I wrote to Min Aung Hlaing, inviting him for a 2-hour unedited interview in Naypyidaw to tell the world, to tell his people, to tell all of us, why are you doing what you're doing? Why are there 2.5 million people displaced? Why are there 29,000 political prisoners arrested? Why are there 20 million people in need of acute, urgent humanitarian aid? Why are 100,000 homes burned to the ground? Why is everyone living in fear? There's no place safe. We want to know your thinking. No word. So I'm sitting here in my deep regard for democracy, dialogue, and Dhamma, the 3 Ds on why Myanmar is important to me. And I'm feeling the pain of the people. 43 years of involvement in Myanmar. We're hearing about the horrors of torture and executions and starvation and disease of the 22,000 political prisoners. And I'm thinking, what can be done to bring to the world's attention this urgent, critical crisis? And so I said, I'm going to create a fictional dialogue based in truth from all of what I know and research with the Senior General, conceived as a 5-act literary feature film or a play, and engage this man with everything I've got: conscience, direction, caring, listening. I want to know from you, sir, why you do what you do. You answer in the way you want, and I'll ask questions in the way that I feel. Point 1. The other main reason, and I'll get into the deeper reasons, was my former teacher, not the Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw, who was my preceptor as a bhikkhu, but his successor, the late Venerable Sayadaw U Pandita. A beautiful mind. We did a book of conversations, please bear with me and all the audience, called Wisdom for the World, the requisites of reconciliation, mindful advice for the people of Myanmar. Wei, in that book, he reiterated the importance of dialogue. But you have to, Alan, he said, imagine the mind of the adversary and do everything imaginable to moisten the possibility of what you know very well in your country, the ancient Buddhist Pali words, hiri and ottappa, conscious shame, conscious regret, where one could possibly begin to contract from a transgression. And we all know within our Christian faith, our Buddhist faith, our Islamic faith, the power of redemption and reconciliation within one. So U Pandita, over the many decades of my involvement with him, he was really adamant, if you're going to be involved in my country's struggle for freedom, do not vilify the enemy. Do not, under any circumstance, denigrate them consciously. Speak to that place in them as if it was you, someone trying to awaken your latent qualities of Dhamma, of conscientiousness, of empathy. And what would you say? And so my dialogue with Ming online was imagined, but I asked him every imaginable question, and he answered in all the ways that I feel that a dictator would, not just him, but I studied the mind of authoritarianism throughout history, dictators throughout history, and quite frankly, I gave him every opportunity in this book, and I really wrote it for him and for President Trump and for world leaders. And that the whole purpose of it is to, and my last point is, I think we're in the 40th year anniversary of Live Aid, where the BBC brought unmistakable images of horrific starvation and famine in Ethiopia. Very few people are bringing in the horror of what it means to be in an isolated prison cell or crammed in tight, 6, 10 people, elders, students, nuns, monks. We can't see in those gulags. This book is an illustrated novel like Live Aid that brings the horror of the image into the mind of the viewer. That's why it's been called a literary feature film. It's a documentary film with language meant to evoke the feelings of Live Aid, of looking at those unthinkable starving children and going, oh my God, and it changed the world. Now, am I wishful thinking? No. We have a GoFundMe campaign directed, there's no money in it for all of us, except to get this book into the hands, like Live Aid did and the BBC did 40 years ago. Today, bring conscience, awakening, and visual emotional imagery to world leaders. And I do feel, if they were to know the truth of Burma, the unthinkable starvation, deprivation, to put our minds and bodies in those 29,000 people that have been arrested and imprisoned and tortured and executed and starving in all those places throughout the country that are going through the most unthinkable terror and trauma. Yes, there's courage, but people, I can't see it. I can't feel it. I can't smell it. The book brings Burma's gulags and the radiance of revolution to the leaders of the world, including people like Julian Assange, if he just spoke up, Edward Snowden, Yoko Ono, a lover of Aung San Suu Kyi. Oh my God. And then the last part, which is very, very important, which many people do not get, is that your country, and this is just speaking very personally, is, as Tibet was to Tibetan Buddhism, Myanmar and Burma is to Theravada Dhamma, the experiential qualities of consciousness and context that allow us to understand the relational intelligence. Dhamma is relational intelligence on how to be more awake, more mindfully intelligent, and to overcome and to challenge the forces of denigration within the human psyche, within all human beings. Burma is a Dhamma country. And it includes, of course, other religions, but it's 90% Dhamma based. It's not Buddhist based alone. I was a monk there. They don't really let you become a Buddhist. They really want you to feel what it means to live in context, to give, to listen, to develop empathy and compassion and loving kindness. You know, I respect Dasu as an ally and a friend and all the leaders who have died or been imprisoned or killed or disappeared or in languishing now in chains. We talked last time, they're trans-Buddhists. They are experientially rooted people in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The essence of that, dignity, conscience, and freedom. The oxygen of that revolution is about freedom. Daw Aung San Suu Kyi, that ancient quality, let's talk about it. Stop killing. That's the Dhamma of your country's struggle for freedom and democracy. In my country, around the world today, violence, it's almost cliched to say way, has been so normalized that it's murder incorporated. The deep state, one of the great cliches of being thrown around in the New York Times and the Financial Post, the deep state, it's about the military industrial complex. They control everything. And it's grabbed the conscience of men and women and leaders around the world. Burma's struggle for freedom and democracy was a feminine-based, nonviolent struggle for equality and justice and peace, and they've been imprisoned. Your country's democracy has been decapitated. Imagine if Europe, Germany, England, America, I use the word, all elected officials were decapitated and imprisoned, killed, or tortured to death. It would be like an outrage beyond imagination. Burma's elected leadership, 86% of the votes in your country back in 2020, November what, 8th? A man didn't like the results, imprisoned every elected leader, every minister, every cabinet minister, every parliamentarian, every congresswoman, every congressman, the president, the state councilor. Imagine doing that in America, in England, in Germany. It would be unthinkable. So it's like, whoa, my effort with this book is to, yes, call for the immediate release of all unlawfully elected democratic leaders. Not just Dasu, give democracy a chance to speak in Burma, free them. And the book is meant to let world leaders know, wow, this is a brother and sister democracy. It's rooted in Dhamma, in equality, in justice. It's feminine inspired. And you know, we need to give freedom and justice and peace a chance. And this book is bringing live aid, as Mr. Geldof did in those images from the BBC of starving children. It's bringing the truth visually and emotionally into the hearts and minds of places that normally won't see it and hear it. The White House, Downing Street. And so that's the reason I wrote it, is to change the course of history, hopefully in Myanmar and soon.
Thank you, Alan. I will come to the point where we can talk about your campaign, which is, I understand, that you are going to send the messages to the leaders around the world, as you have said. But first of all, I've got basically two questions before I go there. The first one is, when they staged the coup, the military staged the coup, they gave the reason, political reason, if you like, which is basically focusing on the result of the 2020 elections, and they claim that there were many irregularities in the elections, and only failed to cooperate to sort this mess out, and they have no other choice, and they have to take control of the country. So when you approach to them and ask their justifications why they staged the coup, they will tell you that there are political reasons. So my question is, why do you think it is so important to understand their justifications?
no insult to Senior General Ming Online, but he just acted like a stupid child for fear of his family, fear of persecution, fear of the International Criminal Court, fear of profit, fear of money, fear of being saluted at, fear of being insignificant. I think the deepest fear that most men have that are in power is being insignificant. And of course, there's also a radical jealousy that goes on with insecure men. As a man, I understand a little bit about that. And, Daw Aung San Suu Kyi and the people around her, 54 million people of Myanmar, the vast majority listen and call her Ma Su, mother of the nation, her father, General Aung San, a radical revolutionary who brought independence to the country. I mean, she's got pedigree. He's just a sad little quay. No offense to him, but he acts like a very terrified guy dressed up in a uniform, polishing medals that have no significance other than wars that he started. He's like a self-decorated Halloween creature, costume creature. I mean, no offense to him. I've said these things in my book to him. Like, what's your justification? And he jumps all over me and said, what right do you have, Mr. Moral Journalist, to talk about the violence in my country when look at your country, Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan? I said, yeah, hypocrisy runs wild around the country. Doesn't make what you're doing right. So I think at the core of it, if he had an exit plan, if there was an end game to the stupidity, I think he's cornered and he's frightened and he knows that there's no future. The best that he could hope for. I was in Yugoslavia during the last year of the war. I was very clearly a non-combatant. I was very far away from front lines. I was in Zagreb in Croatia. I went to, Sarajevo just a few months after the war ended. Srebrenica, the great massacre in Bosnia, 8,000 Muslim men and boys separated from the women in the soccer stadium. We all know it was the 30th year anniversary. I think it was on July 11th. They were all massacred within 48 hours. We know the futility of kill, 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 but Ming Online gets justification because Netanyahu kills, Zelensky kills, Putin kills, Xi Jinping kills, President Trump, a man of peace. Let's give Zelensky weapons to take down Moscow. I mean, you look like a complete two-faced, tragic wimp of the deep state to do those kind of things. And then to excuse the whole Epstein files after going on and on and on about everything is going to be revealed and transparent. And it's like the normalization way of Murder Incorporated. Ming Online can just hang back and drink his whiskey and fly in his private jet because the norm today is Murder Incorporated, Money Incorporated. Look at all the illicit drug labs within Shan State today. I think there's been 12 of them that have been identified by aerial phenomena. And methamphetamines. Donald Trump, if he knew that Ming Online was trafficking in fentanyl, that letter he wrote to him and said, hey, dude, you're done. There's fentanyl all over our city streets. And so I think he feels comfortable in his posture. And that's a very challenging thing. I don't mean to insult you, sir, if you listen to this. But you insult your wife. The wife insults you. Your cronies insult you. You're on the wrong side of history. You're a Buddhist. Just study the life of Angulimala. You're an Angulimala times 1,000. And you go, how do you justify the hypocrisy of that? So the reasoning behind it, I think it's normalized. He's got a lot of power to protect him in that. Well, the presidential palace got pretty cracked down in the 7.7 Sagaing earthquake. He's got big gorilla Xi Jinping behind him. He's got the nuclear plant by Putin now. He's feeling like, I've got some testosterone. I've got some major, no offense, balls. But he has no legitimacy among 54 million people. So he went, oh my God, what's going to happen to me if I let the NLD take over parliament? And even though I've got my 25%, and I could run the risk of finding myself being captured, imprisoned, and dying like a little aging quay in a rotten cell somewhere in Europe. So the options weren't very good for him to let the people vote. And I think he took a cue card from what happened with the 2020 election in America and just reversed it and said, guess what? Dawsu and the NLD and the people stole the election. They lied. They cheated the irregular. How can you trust a sociopath to tell the truth? And Ming Online is a proven track record. No offense to you, sir, but your record shows through your behavior, not your words. So it's complete manufactured, it's lies, it's deception, and he's teetering on a puppet string. And I, sad to say, this book, Conversation with the Dictator, is meant for world leaders. The GoFundMe campaign under the book's title's name. Don't just go there and look at our trailer. Donate like you did at Live Aid. Feed the starving people. Feed the conscience of world leaders to awaken. Please go to that website. Not one penny of us go to Fergus, the director, or myself. We're going to donate as many books as we can to world leaders, influencers, all the Nobel laureates, all the parliamentarians, the leaders of ASEAN. We even want to give them to the leaders of the Tamada. We want to make an AI animated version of the book in multiple languages. Help us create this to cross borders to change the course of history, just like Mr. Geldof did with Live Aid. We want to do with this book, Conversation with the Dictator. Go to our GoFundMe campaign. Go to useyourfreedom.org and not just read or look, move to donate. Tell your friends. Forward it worldwide across all platforms, Instagram, TikTok, X, Facebook, email. No time to waste right now. Get this literary feature film. Get Live Aid into the minds of those who can make a difference. I can guarantee you, if Mr. Trump or any of the people of Elon Musk were to read this, you know something? This is a very extraordinary culture. And that's why it's a whole other topic of why Myanmar matters. To me, I've never seen anything like the revolutionary nature of the spirit under Dawsu, U Tinu, U Chimung, U Win Tin, U Win Tain, and all the elected leaders that have been imprisoned or killed throughout history in the last 35, 38 years. Minko 9, Koko G, so many people are rooted in radical empathy, radical karuna, radical metta, loving kindness in action was a Dawsu phrase. And where do you see today? Allow me to be passionate because it's a passionate moment. Where do you see today a culture sane? Dawsu is sane in her prison cell. She could be dead, Wei. We heard recently that it was leaked by her lawyers in Paris that she was injured. That's Ming Online's way of saying, I didn't kill her. We need to act right now because she's saying the future is one of dialogue, and it doesn't mean compromising. It means not forgetting, holding accountable, and having all the various groups of your beloved country, the Shan, the Kachin, the Hmong, the Rakhine, the Buddhists, the Muslims, the atheists, the Jews, the Buddhists, the nuns, the monks, the priests. What a celebration it would be if Myanmar became, whoa, they put down the gun. Ming Online said, you know, I made a mistake. It's possible. Last point about this before I get over my rant is that, you know, Seda U Pandita was very fond, and he told Dawsu numerous times, not just her, about the role of ancient India's King Ashoka, who was the ruthless, merciless murderer in northern India. And one day in the great Kalinga War, he was there killing as he was normally doing without conscience or hiri or otapa. And he just, for some reason, way, you know the story probably very well from a child, is that he saw what he was looking at with the skin peeling off of this soldier's face and the maggots and the flies. And he said, "Oh my God, that's me. That's my wife. That's my husband. That's my child. That is my lack of awakening and conscience and hearing." And he dropped to his knees, it said, and he changed his ways. And we have Dhamma in the world today, his children, out of the redemption of his own mind. He empowered the sasana, the nuns and the monks in ancient India, sent them around the world. We have Dhamma today based on King Ashoka's redemption. Oh, Alan, you're just an old school guy who doesn't understand the power of the bullet.
So, Alan, do you really believe you can actually awaken that conscience and moral accountability who commit atrocities?
I do, with 100%. You know, I've seen little things in myself over the years where I've lied, I've cheated. I stole as a little young kid. I stole turtles from a department store once. And, you know, but I've not ever killed anyone or purposely harmed, but I've seen through the power of mindful, intelligent reflection on presence, through the senses and the emotions of greed, anger, and delusion, that you can change the course of your own consciousness if you mindfully are aware in the right context. And it's like, you know, my friend U Tinu, who introduced me to Dasu, the former general of the army. When I first met him, when he was released after his first 6 years, way, to answer your question, of solitary confinement, Ne Win, the ultimate strongman in Burma, he was his #1 killer. And he was so jealous of U Tinu's popularity, he imprisoned him playing golf. When released, he spent one night at home with his wife, and he came to the monastery where he ordained. We became very close friends. He told me, through the power of his meditative experience in isolation, he had so many hours and days and months of reflecting on that struggle of the human psyche to rectify its wrong. And he told me very intimately the awakening of Hiri and Ottappan himself through the isolation of being imprisoned, defrocked of his general life, his wife, his family, his power, his golf games. He broke down in conscience and awakened in the arising of karuna and empathy. And he came to the monastery. Well, as you know, in your country, I think he's the great expression of the King Ashoka in Burma. He had 9 bullet holes in his body from hand-to-hand combat and being shot. And he was one of the greatest exponents of peace in Myanmar history around the world. He was Burma's Gandhi. And he spent 19 years eventually in prison. And I never saw one moment of anger or rage or revenge in him or many of the other leaders in your country. So yes, it's possible. We have examples even within the Dhammadha. And it's a question of how morally creative can we get to bring that Live Aid child starving into the face of Ming Online and go, you know something, that's your daughter. And all of a sudden he can't escape. That's the power of art, the power of film, the power of theater, the power of comedy, the power of satire. We've got to be creative right now because we can't outshoot them. Maybe you can, but they've got Ming Online, they've got Xi Jinping, they've got Putin with weapons and drones and missiles and jets. How can you outkill that level of algorithmic perfection to murder in mass? I mean, look at Netanyahu does in Gaza. What if Netanyahu, or if someone gave Ming Online weapons of mass destruction? What's that nuclear plant being built by Putin outside of Naypyidaw? Is that going to be the same nuclear plant that America and Israel just bombed outside of Tehran? It's like, we better act collectively to save Myanmar culture and democracy and dialogue. It's not just Myanmar. It's a culture that empowered dialogue, way. And the world has lost its way through the military industrial complex, Murder Incorporated. And it's all done from a safe distance with suits and wine and sex and restaurants. And 1 million people in Iraq, 17 years in Afghanistan. The figures go from anywhere between 1 million and 2 million people that are dying, 5,000 a week, President Trump is fond of saying, that are massacred in Ukraine and Russia every week. Haven't we as a culture become consciously sickened? What is the word? Wetiko in my culture here. The American indigenous cultures, the indigenous people of North America, wetiko. It's a type of institutionalized cannibalism, not physically eating flesh, but just the fetish of evil where it controls large swaths of politics and people. And all of a sudden, and I think a lot of the world right now is being covered and cloaked by this collective psychosis. And we're looking for leaders and politicians and artists who just, you know something? Was it Yitzhak Rabin in Israel, back the former prime minister, who won the Nobel Peace Prize in '94? We need a political solution. We need to make friends with our enemy, the Israeli prime minister around Palestine. We need that level of moral imagination, not those who can kill with precision. And I think right now, if enough of us rise up, those 22,000 dissident prisoners in Burma's gulags, we want to hear what they have to say because they're the elected democratic leaders. Yes, I respect the revolutionaries courageously engaging, but it's a war of attrition, and it's going to be very hard to outgun China and Putin's support of Ming Online. And if we're not careful, I used to say a decade ago that Burma could be the next Tibet. It could be a region of China in the next 3 to 5 years. They want the oil, they want the gas, they want the rubies, they want the slave labor. And they've got a running dog there in Naypyidaw right now, and they've got him by the balls. So it's our moment right now to rise up and speak of nonviolence and the power of dialogue. And whether he comes around and says, I did the wrong thing, it's going to be irrelevant because enough of us rise up. He'll be looking after himself and his family. And it could very well be one of the greatest moral uprisings the world has seen in modern history. It could be the next Gandhi, the Martin Luther King. It could have been exactly what Mandela did in reconciliation in South Africa. We may have a Nobel Peace Prize for the people of Burma, for the 22,000 political prisoners. That's my nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize. Those people have skin in the game. We want to hear what they have to say. Free Burma, free Aung San Suu Kyi, free President Min Mint, and let's unify around the world. Let's put the past behind us. One last point here about this. I know time is precious. Is, my country of America, during World War II, I mean, could you say enough about the evil of Germany in World War II? I mean, come on, 11 to 20 million people purposely persecuted, killed, mangled, experimented on Bengali. It's like, yeah. And now they're one of the great democracies in the world, our friends, a thriving, only 85 years later, we ask about the question of redemption. Look at Germany. Russia, Putin, autocratic, authoritarian, evil. They were America's greatest ally during World War II. What happened? All we have to do is look at history and realize, something, Ming Online could change. Wars could end if we have enough moral courage to do the right thing.
So, Alan, could you elaborate a bit more about your campaign, Alan? I understand that you will send the copies of the book to the world leaders. So what do you want them to do for Burma?
Thank you for that. We're buying cartons of the book wholesale. They're being sent to Fergus Harlow, my friend, colleague, co-author, scholar on Burma, especially the Rohingya crisis. And they're being gifted ever so carefully to the head of Amnesty, the head of Human Rights Watch, the head of Fortify Rights, the Prime Minister of the UK, to President Trump, to Tulsi Gabbard, to Elon Musk, to Julian Assange, to Yoko Ono, to you name it. We're going to keep going out. If we have enough to buy 50 copies, 100 copies, 1,000 copies, we're going to send them out individually with handwritten letters specific to the person, nothing in stock, to use the Daw Aung San Suu Kyi phrase, use your freedom for the freedom of us. Say what you feel motivated to say. Put the past behind to the extent that you're able. And remember that we're all family on this planet as humans. We're all family based on our love of freedom and human rights and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. All beings are born equal. Remember your pledge to that 3-page document. We're also family based upon consciousness, the DNA of being alive. And all of us are family if we put ourselves in the body of the other as brother, sister, as the Buddha encouraged us to do, as Christ encouraged us to put ourselves in the body of the other as family. Bring yourself to be in the family of the people of Myanmar, not just the Daw Suu. They have every right to dream. And I heard a child the other day in a documentary film. He was crying, he was saying, I had a moment in 2020, the elections, to believe in freedom and democracy. And this boy, the lady got on to the documentary and said he had to witness when the Thamada sent his father's body back to his village without a head. And the boy could not even cry. He had been so numbed by the trauma of war. Give the 54 million people a chance. Give the Rohingya a chance to survive. Give the Kachin, the Shan, release the political prisoners. And I just want them to speak up. I mean, if Julian Assange got a copy of this book and spoke up, or if Roger Waters from Pink Floyd, who was one of Julian's greatest spokespeople during his incarceration, I mean, if Jay-Z got out there, Kanye got out there, some great hip hop artist, Rihanna, and said, you know, Daw Aung San Suu Kyi was vilified. It's been a persecution, a witch hunt. The truth is, as it's been discovered in Mr. Harlow's book and Clements' book, Aung San Suu Kyi from Prison, where every word that she's ever said since her release in 2010 was transcribed by Fergus. It was all based on lies, the persecution where she is today. She spoke up for the Rohingya. There is no place in Rakhine State for the Rohingya to go back to now. ARSA was a bona fide terrorist organization, 30 military outposts. They did an October 7th in Rakhine State way back then. Yes, the Thamada is a very evil institution at times, but the boys and girls in that institution are indoctrinated. But it gave them due cause, just like Netanyahu attacked Gaza on October 7th. Ming Online said, you know, 30 military outposts by ARSA, that's war. And ARSA, it's been documented, went and reverse engineered, killing 100 Hindus within days. And so it's like the story has been grossly misrepresented. In my dialogue with Ming Online, I confront him with this. Aung San Suu Kyi spoke at The Hague not to defend the military's ethnic cleansing of the Rohingya, but to bring peace to the people of the country. She even called for, quote unquote, if there are atrocities in the Tamada, we will deal with it in our own country. They will be court-martialed and imprisoned. That's not supporting evil, Wei. This has all been documented. It's been lies. Just like Julian Assange did not speak lies, Dawsu did not lie. It's been a witch hunt. And I think enough people, artists, are going to go like, you know something? I like her because she represents the people. And they've got a lot of skin in the game behind those bars. We want her voice at 80 years old to speak the truth. We want President Win Myint, an elected president. Many people would love to have seen Donald Trump imprisoned, but not today. Imagine a prime minister or the Pope being imprisoned. It's just like, the president of Burma, elected by the people, decapitated. That's wrong. So I want world leaders to know the truth. The book, it's not a book. It's Live Aid in 2 hours. Doesn't take more than 2 hours to read, to feel 300 full-page images. You get to see inside of Insane Prison, Mandalay Obo Prison. You also get to see the radiance of the people. But you also understand, too, that Burma was occupied by settler genocidal colonialism for close to 120 years. There was a reason for the trauma of 6 successive dictatorships, with Ming Online being the latest. And I confront him with this. You inherited persecution. You inherited trauma. You inherited obedience as democracy. And you picked it up from where? And he says, the British have no place in this conversation. They're gone. They are? They seem to control you today. But it didn't start with the British. These are primordial forces within the human psyche. I said, sir, you're a Buddhist. What about the role of kamma and karma and the results? And he goes on to his own denial about what karma means in his next life, which is almost a guaranteed, no offense, and I hope he does redeem himself. It's a guaranteed hell world, an apaya realm, a peta, a hungry ghost. And he's already living like a hungry ghost within a very ironed, polished uniform, acting like a human. But those who have conscience and dignity around the world, whether you're a Muslim, a Christian, or a Buddhist, a Jew, an atheist, his behavior is so heinous. He's a hungry ghost in a uniform. And I think he can see that. I think his wife knows that. And I wouldn't be surprised that every mouthful of food, every glass of water or wine or whiskey, someone else tastes it for fear of assassination. He can get out of this alive if he wants.
Yes, Alan. He promised, the military leader has promised the elections. So the international communities urge him, if he want to make the really constructive progress, getting out of this mess, he may need to take at least the step to release all the political prisoners. So, Alan, how is it important to be release all the political prisoners, including Aung San Suu Kyi, if Burma really want to go back to democratization, Alan?
Well, the idea of an election, which sounds sort of like magnanimous and democratic and what nations do, is just a sleight of psychological, it's trickery. It's the behavior of a psychotic. You know, I didn't commit mass murder. I was just ethnically cleansing those people because they're not fit to be citizens of our country. A distortion of values. And I personally feel very strongly that the people of the country and the leaders of the world should absolutely, in a uniform way, there is no such thing as a legitimate election when you lied, cheated, killed, persecuted, and traumatized a nation for nearly 5 years with the last election. You have no trust. Release the political prisoners. You already have a democratic government. We don't need a new one under a dictatorship. You failed the mission, dude. And so the world needs an act of conscience. And I think it's a very difficult moment for the world leaders. The moral integrity, moral courage, emotional intelligence, mindful intelligence, spiritual intelligence is at such a low ebb that I hate to even use the word. It's as if Live Aid was promoting starvation as a virtue rather than bringing it to the world of the West and saying, you can make a difference. David Bowie said, no, I'm not going to sing my song alone. I want to bring the BBC's images of mass hunger to the world. This book is that way of bringing mass persecution and truth to the world leaders. And so I think, number one, to make it really clear, ASEAN, world leaders in democratic nations, wherever you may be, including Xi Jinping and Putin, forget it, Ming Online. The elections are ridiculous. If you want to bring democracy to Myanmar, you already have it. Release it. Step aside. They will agree not to hang you like Jesus or to send you immediately to The Hague. You can cut a bargain. You can go to Moscow to hang with Assad. You can go to Yunnan or go to Beijing and do what you need to do with Xi Jinping, your godfather. You're going to be safe, but give the country back to the people before they take it completely from you. Then number one, enough is enough. There is no election to be had. If there is an election, and I say this with so much respect, because I'm not on the ground in Myanmar, I think it's a time for the mass boycott of a vote so that the vote is so pathetic. The only ones that voted were probably those in uniform. And it's like Ming Online's military government party, whatever you want to call it, the scam fraud that it is, got 7,000 votes, and there was no one else that wanted to vote. And so guess what? We're going to continue being a dictatorship. It's like expose the scam, but cut all dialogue with elections. And if you're going to have elections, you damn well better free the elected democratic leaders now. And let's hear what they say in a reconvened parliament about whether to go forward with a 2025 or early 2026 election. So that's my 2 cents about that. And I think the United Nations and the special rapporteur from the United Nations, Tom Andrews, I think the ambassador, I think the United Nations Security Council, the Secretary General, the Honorable, all leaders around the world should, it's like, Ming Online, enough playing pretend. Okay, it's time for you to go to your friend in Moscow and just get lost. We'll take care of the country. And I think he needs to hear that from enough people around the world. And I wouldn't be surprised that his wife says, Ming, it's time to go, dude. Listen, I want to live. The kids want to live. We can take the billions, but it ain't going to work out. So I think we're coming up to a very, very important point where the pressure is on our side. This is why we released the book now. This is why the campaign, I can't say enough about the campaign. GoFundMe under Conversation with a Dictator. On my website, alanclements.com, under the book's title, everything is there. Get the book, gift it to people, go to the website, go to the GoFundMe page. Don't just look at our trailer, although it's killer. Donate, allow us to give books to world leaders and influencers. And please, it's not enough to feed one person. Share on every social media platform relentlessly until we are able to flood the world with live aid today. Live aid to the people of Burma, live freedom for the prisoners of conscience, 22,000 prisoners. And hear this word loud and clear, Western world and leaders. Burma's democracy was decapitated. Any future election is with a serial killer.
Alan, thank you very much. I'm concluding the conversation now, and I will pause our recording. You said
Yeah, if I go ahead.
Yeah, me online to realize himself. So could you talk about a bit more?
Well, is it possible for Ming Online to have an Ashoka moment, an Angulimala moment, even a minor moment where he stops and reflects upon his transgressions, or even is motivated by fear that I don't want to end up like Gaddafi or Saddam or Mussolini being hung from his feet. His wife says, Ming, they're closing in on us. Okay, I think it's possible for the pressure to build where he has to consider an option, an end game, an out. Redemption is low on the list. He might try it, but the only proof would be for him to free the elected Democratic leaders. That would be a major step in, oh, wow. And then calling on an immediate ceasefire and calling off the elections and calling for, I'm stepping aside, I'm giving the country, I'm returning the country to the people, not giving it to them. He stole it. Getting him to do that is, we can do that. We can win this if there are enough of us at the top level, bottom level, medium level. Like, for example, with this book, it's one thing we gift it to world leaders and influencers. It's another thing if they call us, call Fergus, call me, what do you want us to say? That's another step. Hypothetically, if Elon Musk, with his 220 million X followers, Alan, I read your book, I'm moved. I want to give a couple of shout outs for democracy in Myanmar. What would you want me to say? That'd be a very interesting dialogue. If President Trump invited me for a Zoom call or to the Oval Office with his staff and said, Alan, you've got a lot of time into that country. What would you like me to say? I would say, sir, you're a man of peace with strength, and say, it's wrong what you're doing, Ming Online. I would suggest that you immediately release the unlawfully elected Democratic leaders, President Win Myint, Daw Suu, all the others, and step aside. And stop your illicit drug trafficking. There's too many millions of us around the world suffering from the fentanyl and methamphetamines. And I'm going to put pressure on you with Mr. Putin, Mr. Xi Jinping. I don't like what's going on there. Okay? I'm not saying go turn yourself into the Hague, but get lost. Go to hang out with Assad and have a glass of wine with your wife. Is it possible? I believe it's possible. I saw your people, your leaders come out of prison and believe in the impossible. And they carried that forth up until Ming and his minions decided to lie, to cheat, to persecute, and decapitate the elected leaders. And I wouldn't have spent a year of my life in my condition at this time in my existence if I didn't think it was really a possibility of redemption, the Ashoka, or moving world leaders to speak up. So this is the first for baseball, the first inning of the end game towards the outcome that I envision, which is for the betterment of Ming Online, his cronies, and the business leaders of Myanmar as well. And from last point about this, I think if I were Xi Jinping or if I were Mr. Putin, having a radically conscious based or rooted elected democratic leadership in Myanmar far safeguards the oil and gas and labor and ruby and teak investments in that country. I think it's in Xi Jinping's interest to get rid of Ming Online and the military industrial lie there, and to have Daw Suu and the other elected leaders, even if she were to step aside and there's a whole new election with new people, but not with what we've got as the Constitution. I think Ming Online will step aside, and I think Xi Jinping would say, we're better off under democracy than dictatorship. So I think he loses on every way you look at it. It's just a question of time. So I'm not so concerned with his redemption. I would say it's more important for him to do the right thing, get on national TV, and start to look for the future of his family and his children and his colleagues that isn't going to end up in a prison in a European nation for the rest of his life. He should act really quickly because it's coming crumbling down. So and if he were to bring me to Naypyidaw, he doesn't have to. Just read the book, sir. I'm thinking about your best interest.
So before I forget, Alan, I need to ask you something because you have spent much of the time in Myanmar. So have you ever heard from Aung San Suu Kyi's saying or her comments on the military leader? How did she find his personality or his sort of political way or his ambition? Or I'm trying to understand that why Aung San Suu Kyi failed to understand democratization was so fragile. That is very obvious. So why do Aung San Suu Kyi fail to understand her opponents, especially this military coup leader?
In my humble experience with her over the decades, with her colleagues over the decades, they understood very well that they're dealing with a violent guerrilla, an out of control Quay. My language, a sociopathic, violent, proven track record of merciless torture and killing. They themselves being tortured and imprisoned, and how many of the colleagues were disappeared or killed or imprisoned. So they were very aware of the psychological, emotional makeup, the mindset, and the personality set, if you will, way of Ming Online, of Tan Shui, of Ne Win, of Tain Sein, of monks, all of them, they understand the torture techniques. As students of Vipassana and Satipatthana, or mindful intelligence, they know from their own meditative experience and the study of human consciousness, the depth makeup of these people. They're very, very aware. What happened isn't a result of their lack of awareness or intelligence. It's this. And very few people understand this because it's just not popular. Is Daw Suu was radically intelligent and intuitive. She reads the mind of others like a psychic intuitive. And she's radically committed way to the nonviolent approach, which means the power of the human voice, of deep listening, negotiation, dialogue, compromise, mutual peace. And I don't even have to like you, but I'm not going to harm you or your family. That is the difference between the elected leaders in Myanmar, the Thamada, and most leaders around the world. They believe in violence when they need to use it. Daw Suu would always speak up, as they all would. Yes, there's an appropriate time when needed to take up arms in defense. My father was a living example of bringing that to the people of the country to give them independence. There's a time to put it down, to seek the political solution. In my country, we are immeasurably, using my language, immeasurably saturated in centuries, decades of trauma, of the use of violence. And so she tried an experiment to use the power of the divine feminine, of reconciliation, redemption, and dialogue. And Ming Online and the Thamada and those men, not just in the military, but around the world, excuse the language, they middle finger people who mamsy-pamsy nonsense. Shut the fuck up, bitch. It's like she, Wintain, all of them told me how often they were around people with the military and they hated them. And they were associating at luncheons and dinners in parliament with people who tortured and raped and killed close or in proximity to their families and friends. We understand their behavior, Alan. We were imprisoned. Everyone knows someone killed and tortured in Burma. But we're not going to play that game. That, for lack of better terms, that level of peacemaking commitment is where the world falls short. Many of the Burmese fall short. And that's where the world vilified her around the Rohingya crisis. Take sides. Well, she did take sides, which was called peace for both sides. And people don't like that. They're a black and white world. Mm. And that's the beauty of your country's democracy, is that it was a nonviolent revolution of the spirit. That's what drew me in. And I understand the use of the weapon, but I want to see the elected leaders released. And my sense is, in knowing them for decades, we've got to stop the killing. When is it going to stop? Can you really kill the upper echelon of Ming Online and all of them? Can you kill them off? Can you kill dictatorship off? Can you kill the indoctrination of dictatorship out of the psyche of the Thamada? I mean, it's just not going to work. Daw Suu and all of her colleagues know that it's a long-term educational process, mindful educational process, social education. It's not overlooking the wrongs, but you cannot win by out killing them. And that's not easy to hear. So I not refute what you're saying, but she and they understood probably better than anyone on the planet. Mm-hmm. They didn't underestimate what they were dealing with. Remember, her deep colleague, the NLD member, lawyer, Kony Ni from Rakhine State, who was trying to reform legally the military constitution of 2007. I was there. We talked about it. I wasn't at the airport when he was assassinated with his grandson, but I was a few miles away, and you could feel like, oh, wow, she wanted to change things legally. nonviolently, and she was very aware that we're dealing with monsters.
Mm.
And even U Win Tin, he and Da Su, in a way, didn't agree with the approach of reconciliation with the Thamada. They needed to, from U Win Tin's point of view, gone. There's no redemption for them. They needed to be set aside. And she broke away from that. And he, in his own quiet way, disagreed with her approach. And look where they are today. But how do you resolve a complexity so complex as what's going on there unless someone has the moral courage to put down the fist and the gun? They know not what they do. Let's talk about it. And I think that's what the world is seeing today in Ukraine with Trump. He's looking like a hypocrite. Peace at all costs, peace within 24 hours. Let's give Zelensky missiles to take down Moscow. Let's give Netanyahu more and more to massacre in real time a genocide in Gaza. Even the New York Times, the running dog of Israel, is now admitting that it's a genocide in Gaza. And where are their weapons coming from? America, Germany. So this war machine is like Sue and the leaders said, enough killing. The last point I would make, if someone were to really ask me, I might even do a theater piece or a film. How would you go about changing the world, saving the world? I think the leaders of the world need to go on a 10-day, 2-week, weekend, or a month-long junket without the suits and without the family and hang out, live and breathe with decomposing bodies that are being killed with drones and missiles and bombs and bullets and no antibiotics. And they're hanging out day and night with the carnage of their comfortable decisions from way back in the air-conditioned palaces of their capitals. The closer you get to what you do in the name of freedom and democracy, the more likely you are to have it informed by morality. Last point, when I was a monk, we were encouraged to overcome some of our bad habits,
Which is?
Your fetish for living, when in fact, all of us die. And you could have a much more sacred day if you understood the value of just one breath. Are you really living the life that you really want to live? Are you doing what you really need to do by your family, your friends? So they would encourage us to go to the morgue, the burning god. How many autopsies that I would go to in Rangoon General Hospital and look at boys and girls and elders being carved open medically and just going, oh my God, that is the human condition. Then when I went out to Shan State and the Karen states in the late 1988, 89, 1990, 91, it was the first time in my life I'd seen bodies that had been 2, 3 days, a week bloated, that had been shot, killed, burned, beheaded. I still can't shake from my mind the images and the smell of decomposing bodies. And I think that's what Live Aid was about. They brought the images of mass famine and starvation into the comfort of mansions in Downing Street in Washington and the comfort of white Westerners and said, this could be you. You can make a difference. I think leaders need to get up close to the carnage that they create. And I think peace would pretty quickly come to a lot of places in the world because killing each other is so prehistoric. It's just really 2 days ago, as far as I can see.